Is Babylon 5 actually getting a second, third chance of the reboot J. Michael Straczynski promised us 2 years ago? Welcome to SciTrek Daily, your daily dose of sci-fi TV and movie news. So, I actually told you back in April, and fell out with J. Michael Straczynski because I told you, that studios that had been looking at the Babylon 5 reboot were no longer interested. That back in April, actually, HBO had already said they weren't going to be doing it. So Warner Brothers sent the script out to a lot of major studios. I told you that studios like Amazon, Disney, the Peacock Network were looking at it, so was that NBC Universal, were interested. But we're going to say no. J. Michael Straczynski actually did come out almost immediately and say one of the big studios had already said no, but I'd found out that the others were going to as well. Now, J. Michael Straczynski wasn't very happy with me for saying that, and he called me a bad word on Twitter. But I've got 8 months later, we can still find out that there is no news on Babylon 5 because I was right. Sadly. To be honest, very sadly right, because I would have loved to have seen what J. Michael Straczynski would have done with the Babylon 5 saga after, years of experience, new special effects, new CGI, etc. So, why am I talking about this again? Because I'm hearing, actually, that Amazon may actually be reigniting that interest. That they have always thought of Babylon 5 as a project that would really fit nicely on Freevee, a network that they've actually sort of ignored a little bit for the last 12 months, but are hoping to get going again with. Now, Amazon have had a little bit of a problem over the last 18 months or so, really since the strikes, that they don't have enough capacity. They don't have enough studio space. You guys know, if you're regular SciTrekkers, that I've been talking about this with Stargate Saga, and just desperately wanted Stargate to return. And the main hold-up for Stargate is that Amazon are in no rush, but also they just don't have the studio space. But that is starting to improve a little bit now. It looks like they've got a deal, or they're trying to get a deal with Sony to use some of the Culver City studio space, but they've also got a deal with a company called the Hackman Group, a company they actually partly own. They're one of the major investors for, who are the world's largest independent studio space owner. For more studio space, and that studios is coming online now. So they're starting to get access, long-term rental agreements on far more studio space. That is then allowing them to start thinking about some of these projects that 12 months ago they couldn't, because they were just desperately trying to do all the stuff they were supposed to have done during the strikes the year before. So all of a sudden Amazon are looking at something like Babylon 5 and thinking, this is the perfect project for Freevee. We want to start pushing Freevee, MGM Plus, and other channels as real, important channels that are bolt-ons for Amazon. They want Amazon Prime to be a hub where people go to watch Apple and Disney, etc., but also to push things like MGM Plus to really compete with those other channels. Now, Freevee for Babylon 5, do I think that's a good idea? Initially, not really. Now, a lot of people will say, I don't want to watch it on Freevee, I'll have to watch adverts. I don't really care about that, because I actually don't mind the Freevee adverts, because I like that you get the little counter and you know how long it is. And if it's like 90 seconds, you're like, oh, that's time for a wee. Or if it's like 2 minutes, like, oh, I go get a drink. I don't mind it too much. And you can pause it as well. So I don't mind the adverts on Freevee. But come back to me in 2 years and see if I still mind. At the moment, there aren't many people that actually advertise on Freevee. So it's not really as much of an irritation, because there's basically like a Polestar advert and maybe like Amazon Prime adverts. And that's about it. So come back to me if actually it gets popular and they start getting more people on there to advertise. Because obviously if you start getting 6-minute adverts, I might not be so pleased. But anyway, I don't mind that too much at the moment. Babylon 5 for me should be the type of TV show that fits on a network like that, because it doesn't need lots and lots of money spent on it. I actually think J. Michael Straczynski is very good at doing things on a shoestring. He proved that more than once. But I also think Babylon 5 is kind of like a dark and gritty sci-fi adventure. It doesn't need to be flashy and exciting like SciTrek, Star Trek, that own, that cost like $10 million an episode. I'm thinking more like The Expanse, which cost like $5 million an episode. I actually wonder if something like The Expanse was on Freevee a couple of years ago instead of Prime, we may have got the rest of that season. We may have got seasons 6, 7, and 8 sort of thing, 7, 8, and 9. But because it was on Prime, it was expected to be this. When it was only this, it didn't really make sense in a business model. But actually, it was only for like $4 million an episode to make. That's something that could have fit beautifully on Freevee. Babylon 5, I think, is in the same sort of sphere as like Expanse. They could do something for $4 or $5 million an episode that would still be beautiful, because The Expanse always was. But it doesn't have to be to quite the same level as something like Star Trek. So for me, that makes sense. But there is a small problem. According to the sources that I get to speak to in Hollywood that are telling me about this, Amazon's interest was relatively fleeting. That apparently they've not closed the door on it completely, but they sort of had a conversation with Warner Brothers about how much this actually would cost to produce. And it's not the $4 or $5 million an episode. Warner Brothers was suggesting this would cost more like $6, $7, $8 million an episode on average. Some would come in more, some would come in less, depending on, if there's a big space battle episode, it's going to come in more. If there's more of a talking and there episode, it'll come in a bit less. But $6, $7, $8 million on average. Whereas Amazon would like, $4 million tops. I don't know if that conversation is carrying on at the moment, but apparently, as I said, Amazon didn't necessarily close the door to it, but they're not exactly beating down the door to Warner Brothers either. So are we going to get a Babylon 5 reboot? Well, after 6, 7 months now of waiting since JMS's last Twitter announcement that this was going to go out, I think it's unlikely. I think there are a lot of studios that are looking a little bit sideways at sci-fi at the moment, in particular because it is quite expensive. We're getting things. Disney's still producing a few things like the new Aliens series and stuff. But I think some of the smaller channels are thinking, these are very expensive shows, and if they don't work, that's a lot of money thrown out the window. So Amazon might not be so confident, or at very least they're going to want to do it on a budget that maybe Warner Brothers aren't interested to do it on. Warner Brothers, by the way, we were the first channel to tell you that Warner Brothers didn't want to make this for themselves. They wanted to make it for somebody else. We were the first ones to tell you that it wasn't going to appear on the CW. But Warner Brothers want to use their studio space to produce material for other people. The small problem with that is they want to do it at a profit. And I think Amazon maybe want to squeeze a little bit more out of them than they're willing. Maybe all this needs is J. Michael Straczynski to do a rewrite of the script, to do something that's maybe a little bit more within budget, or to think about clever ways of managing that budget. But at the moment, that conversation isn't happening as far as I know. But let's wait and see, because maybe the new year will give us some interesting new news on Babylon 5, because I would like to see what he'd do with it. I'm a big fan. But guys, get into the comments, tell me what you think. Is Babylon 5 a reimagined hard reboot, something you want to see? Or are you thinking, no, please God, no, don't do that? Get into the comments and tell me. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.